Thank you very much. Welcome to today's meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. It will be a bit soggy. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking. Thank you very much. Right, turning to the agenda. Do we have any substitutes this evening?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Sopcich for Councillor Cockerham and Councillor Kinnersley for Councillor Round.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest? I think I might have one. Jabba?
Agenda item 6, Chair, regarding the place partnership. In regards to Worcester Mellor, I think it's a pecuniary interest, so I'll be leaving the room.
Anybody else? Declaration of interest. A minor interest in that in the place partnership bid it refers to county council divisional funds, and as a county councillor I agreed some funding for Light Night, which has been kind of carried forward into what might be this project. So not a personal interest, but use of funds. Public representations? No, I see no public. Brings us to minutes of the meeting on the 3rd of September. If I go through page by page, people happy to agree or any comments or amendments? So page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5 and 6. Okay, so happy that I sign those as an accurate record. Thank you. Seeing nods. The next item, Scala Arts Centre contractor procurement, the next big decision on the Scala journey.
Thank you, Chair. What I want to do is start by picking up the relevant points in the main report, which includes price, contingency, funding position, preferred options, and then I want to move to the supplementary report to cover the phase 1 price, revised contingency, meeting the budget deficit, and then the final recommendations. So starting off with the main report, there is an awful lot of information here, so I'm going to try and help in terms of clarity by not going through lots and lots of detail, because I think it will tell the story better to omit some of the background information, for example. But once I've finished, if members feel that we've skipped over something, I'm sure between the officers we can pick up any particular questions. So I will start off in paragraph 213, and as that says there, on the 4th of September, Speller Metcalfe submitted a final cost price of 11.121 million, and that was for the Scala and the Corn Exchange. Moving on to paragraph 215. The tendered price, as noted, is in excess of the total funding available without recourse to extensive reallocation of council reserves and or prudential borrowing, and at that point officers deemed that option as unaffordable. Moving on to contingency. For reasons set out in the report, it is recommended that 5% of the fixed price contract is set aside for contingency. And when I get on to the fixed price that we finally received, I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. So moving on to paragraph 220, the funding position. Expenditure to June 2024 is 4.9 million. Future High Streets Fund available following reallocations is 12.562, and paragraph 221, estimated client costs were 1.081 million, leaving a budget available of 6.943 for the construction phase of the project. If I can move on to preferred option. The preferred option recommended by officers is to split the project into two phases, phase 1 being the Scala and phase 2 being the Corn Exchange. In consultation with Major Programmes Reference Group, officers then asked Speller Metcalfe to submit two prices for these two split phases. So I'll now move on to the supplementary report to continue the timeline. So first of all, I think it's important to point out, as you can see, in terms of recommendations, which we'll come back to at the end, there are no recommendations for any changes to the recommendations set out in the main report. So moving on in terms of price, paragraph 2.3, Speller Metcalfe have submitted a revised price for phase 1, which is Scala only, of £9.365 million. If I move on to paragraph 2.4, so in addition to the 5% contingency, officers are recommending an additional 100,000 contingency to cover the risks associated mainly with architects' revisions associated with the new approach, because there is still some work to be done. So based on the original 5% plus the 100k, that gives overall contingencies now of 0.568 million. And those are in addition to the contingencies already included in the contract, in the construction contract. If I just move on, so council funding position 2.5, a total cost of 15.460 is therefore anticipated for phase 1. This gives a budget deficit of 2.523 million, and paragraph 2.6 and the table below sets out the funding proposition to meet this gap from existing reserves as set out in the table, which is the budget deficit 2.523. So you'll see that there. I'm happy to pause at that point. That's where we've got to. We are in a position where we have a final tendered price from Spellers. We have looked at contingencies, we've looked at risk, we've looked at the funding gap, and we have set out a recommendation to close the gap from reserves without resorting to prudential borrowing. I think at that point we're happy now to take questions. Thank you.
Everybody's gone quiet and shy. I can't believe that. Adam,
A couple of questions on the phasing. Assuming we do find the funding for phase 2, are we committed to Speller Metcalfe for that? Are we letting the contract for phase 1 and phase 2 together? Secondly, if phase 2 is delayed unfathomably long, does it jeopardise the usability of the Arts Centre? Will it have catering facilities? Does it matter if we don't have? What's the great advantage of having phase 1 and phase 2 done? Be more explicit about why it's integral to the long-term future of the whole project.
Through you, Chair. Yes, we are committed to Speller Metcalfe. They have said that they will hold the prices for a period of time. Of course, coming back to your point, if there is a unfathomable, I think you said in terms of delay, those prices will inevitably have to be reviewed. So that's the answer to that. In terms of the desirability, I think it's fair to say that none of the officers are suggesting that we don't do the Corn Exchange at all. There is an absolute desire, and meetings are taking place, have taken place today, in fact, looking at what we can do in terms of options with regard to the Corn Exchange. Is it absolutely critical to the running of the Scala? No, it isn't. They are separate buildings and they can run separately functionally. Is it desirable? Of course it is, for two reasons. One, it will add to the amenity value of the building, and also nobody wants to operate a building with an empty building next door. So an empty building next door will detract from the desirability of the building as a venue. So yes, it's very desirable that we get something up and running in the Corn Exchange, even if it is a meanwhile use, so to speak, rather than a final solution. But aiming for the best, hoping for the best and planning for the worst, if the building wasn't brought forward in a timely fashion, we could open the Scala without it. You know, it wouldn't overly jeopardise the Scala building.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask a couple of questions that I'm afraid I already know the answer, but I'm doing it for the benefit for anybody who might be watching from the public, just to help people understand where we are and where we come to this point. So the cost of the construction seems to be increasing all the time. And I was just wondering if you could explain why that is happening and how confident you are that the current cost or the cost of this contract is the final figure for the project.
Sorry, I'll do the second one first and then seek a view from colleagues. So in terms of how confident we are that the final price is the final price, it is a fixed price in as much that if there are any variations with the tendered prices that Speller have received, they will pick up the risk on those in the same way that they will pick up any benefit if the prices in the end come in slightly below the tendered figures. So those prices sit with them, and they will manage any ups and downs within those tendered costs. Where there is risk, and that is why we have set aside the five, and within the Speller contract, there will be contingencies already. The reason why we have set aside the additional £500,000 is because of I suppose the best phrase is to say, the known unknowns with the building. So it would have been impossible to carry out a full survey, and I'll use this as an example because it's the one that we always refer to. It would have been impossible for us to carry out a full survey of the roof structure without scaffolding and committing to an significant additional cost. Survey work has been done, and the costs are based on the work that's been done. But of course, that means that parts of the roof have not all been examined. So there is, with a building of that age, some risk that some of the parts will be in worse condition than we anticipate. So that's why we've set aside the 500,000. We believe that's within the cost envelope achievable. We very much hope that it is sufficient, but there is no guarantee that once further work is done on the building and further elements are exposed, unanticipated additional costs won't be identified. I think that's the best place to put that. In terms of the cost increases between each of the stages, it's been well documented that as we've moved from each REBA stage, the costs have gone up. I would ask Jamie or Shane if they wish to comment on that. I think it's fair to say that it has been a subject of some disappointment and frustration that every time we reach a new stage, the costs have only gone in one direction. But I would ask colleagues if they wish to comment further.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, David already highlighted as you go through the journey of design and through the various REBA stages, the detail which is being examined and the detail which is being presented is much greater. So, for example, when we were at stage 3, that scheme was costed on the basis of half a dozen drawings. Now that we're at stage 4 and the tender price which Spellers have returned to us and which we're presenting today, I think there were 250 drawings for them to assess. So as the journey's progressed, the detail has progressed, and that's just meant that Spellers have been able to identify and look at the scheme in much greater detail. And unfortunately, that has resulted in an increase in cost.
Chair, can I just also add that there are different models for tendering a construction contract, as some of you will already know. Doing the two-stage tendering process we followed, where there's a preferred contractor and then a detailed cost build-up, isn't the only way to do this. It is, however, industry good practice, and we've had that validated from several sources, even since we've started this project. And what that means is that we're exposed to the truth as we go along before we let the contract instead of afterwards. And so the cost build-up process has been done very transparently. So perhaps I could say it's a high maintenance way of working it through. We have a cost consultant who advises us, a firm of consultancy. We have our own appointed advisor in Jamie. We have then the Speller Metcalfe team doing the costing, working with our design team. So there's a lot of professionals looking at that. What that means, though, is that you're being, as tight control on its funding, that's been a very sensible way to approach it. It does mean, though, as we know before, there can be a narrative that takes hold about cost overrun. We haven't got a cost overrun, so we haven't let the contract yet. It's a cost build-up picture instead.
Thank you very much. I think that's a helpful explanation because you say it is a journey in which we as members have been kind of kept abreast and fully informed at all stages. And I think that when we come to the recommendation, we need to be clear about the decisions that we are making this evening. Thank you. Trouble with two councillors called Alex sat next to each other. So, Councillor Mace.
Thank you very much. As my wife's sister is also married to somebody called Alex, I get this confusion all of the time. Yes, first off, thank you to the officers for the report, and thank you for all the diligence over the many years of this project to transform it from something that was originally completely undeliverable and pie in the sky to the situation we are in now, where we have a deliverable recommendation in front of us. And thank you for answering all of my questions I've sent over today. I know I've probably taken up far too much of your time. So I have 3 questions and then some comments I wanted to make. So my understanding is that we are just over £1.5 million short of being able to fund the full project, including the corn market, and that borrowing to cover that amount would add about £100,000 per year of revenue pressure. Could you confirm that is correct, please? If we phase the work, is the cost of doing the work on the corn market likely to go up further? And will splitting the project into phases increase or decrease the work to be done by officers?
I'll pick that up. Through you, Chair. Yes, as per the email exchange, it's about 1.5 million if we allocate the reserves in their totality, which equates to about 100k of borrowing pressure. Will the cost of the corn exchange increase? I think, without wishing to fluff the answer, it depends. It depends on what options become available in the near future. We're all waiting for an answer for government on a capital grant application. That may give us some options at the end of October. It may not. It depends. Also, if we can do the work at the same time I've learned a lot about the cost of scaffolding over the last few months. If we can do the work at the same time that the Scala scaffolding is in place, that will prevent additional costs being added. If the scaffolding all comes down and then has to go back up again subsequently, clearly it will add cost. So I think the answer is, at the moment, we would do everything. We will endeavour to keep the cost down, including getting an agreement from Spellers to hold their prices, which they've already done once for us. But we don't know. I think your next element was, will it create more work for us? Yes, undoubtedly, whatever we decide or whatever members decide tonight, I think personally it would be nice to get this element done and contracted, because it has soaked up a huge amount of officer time. So to get one phase out of the way, so to speak, and contracted would be great. But inevitably, even if we manage to do that, then there will be lots of work continuing.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I think the concern I've had coming up from reading the report and dealing with the emails that I'm sure officers have already thought about is that a delay in the work on the core market carries considerable risks and costs. The costs of refurbishing the core market may well increase. We can't promise that it won't. We will have to spend officer time rewriting the business plan, because the business plan we approved includes the food and beverage information, and the Scala is then hamstrung from being a vibrant success and a net contributor to the city, because it needs further subsidy, because it doesn't have that revenue from the food and benefit side of it if we don't do the core market. And if I can quote the minutes from this committee from earlier this year, that committee members acknowledge that the food and beverage provision is capable of providing a crucial underpinning revenue stream to the Scala project. And in the approved business plan, it had included 5 cultural areas are supported by 2 commercial activities, being food and beverage and hires. And in the approved Scala business plan, a key objective of the food and beverage provision is to provide create a profitable revenue stream that is mutually beneficial to stakeholders and partners, and also to provide the catering solutions for the events and hires. So, you know, it's key that both commercial activities that Scala will be picking up are going to be helped by having a food and beverage provider next door. So I'm worried that we will be on the hook for basically a larger subsidy for longer if we don't have the corn market completed. And I know that there is the level up funding that you mentioned, David, that we're hoping to come through and save us, but that's not guaranteed. We may get to the end of October and get a negative answer. So I personally think the lowest risk way forward is to make the Scala a success, is to fund the entire project now. Yes, it brings £100,000 of revenue pressure, but it sets up the Scala for the best chance of success. And I would be interested in thoughts of other committee members on that.
I'll just reply to the element around food and beverage. Yes, of course, there is a food and beverage element in terms of the business plan, which is already published. But I think, as I mentioned in my email to you, I wouldn't want to go into any greater discussion around that element this evening, because we are in a commercial tendering process at the moment, and so it would be inappropriate. We are planning to bring back a report on that. It would be really inappropriate to have a detailed conversation in public whilst we are in a commercial negotiation. I'm sure Sian may wish to just add something to that. Thank you, Chair.
I mean, I think this is, we certainly acknowledge this is a crucial point. And the report, the recommendation tonight doesn't ask you to do more than not proceed with the Corn Exchange tonight. It's not to shelve that aspect of the project. It's just to apply phasing. The report also acknowledges that we need to come back, it says, at the next committee and talk about the Corn Exchange with you. In terms of the live procurement, as we say, we are in a live tender. We're talking to the bidders about this scenario. A number of things could happen. We could, even if we had the funding, we could yield the receipts we wanted, or we could not. We could talk to the bidders about doing something different. We ourselves could talk about the cost build-up in the Corn Exchange, which we have started doing. The Creative Consortium have got lots of thoughts about the Corn Exchange. The Corn Exchange definitely needs to be a space that supports the Scala, and I think we all agree with that, that supports including financially. But what we're asking for is a little bit of time and space to explore those options, and they will very much, most definitely be a matter for the committee. And I expect that we would have the Corn Exchange discussion in public and private in two parts, but we're committed to bringing that back to you at the next opportunity.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for that answer, Sian. That's, you know, that's really good to hear. I've got a pragmatic attitude to this, actually, because I know the damage that the Scala building is under at the moment. Every time it rains, actually, I'm thinking about that roof at the moment, and I know how important that building is to get done. And I know that the Corn Exchange has been empty for a long time. It's Grade 2 listed. It's an important building. But as far as I understand it, that roof is actually intact because the work there is internal. So what I'm wondering is with the programmes, Scala, I think the majority of that work and the expense is actually the beams, the roof, all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you're doing fit out, you could align the fit out in the programme. So maybe they could finish at the same time, perhaps. I don't know whether that's being talked about at all, because the fundamental external works, might suffer a bit, but it's like you want the mechanical engineer on site, and they could do both probably later on. My other question is to do with pre-commencement conditions for planning. I think I can talk about that now, Sian, because it's gone through planning. Are there pre-commencement conditions that apply to the whole project that means we couldn't start if we don't do the Corn Exchange? Will we have to do something of that project that we haven't thought about? And just a reference to Angel Place, that we are still going ahead with that, just so the public aren't worried about that element. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. The pre-commencement conditions, there is one element that does relate to the Corn Exchange. We've got to do a photographic survey for an archaeological report, as it's a Grade 2 listed building. We have commissioned that work, and it will be completed in advance of construction starting. There are other elements that we're still looking at, so there's transport and a couple more that we are looking to discharge. The pre-commencement application went in mid-August, So it is being considered by the case officer at the moment, and you know, we're submitting a lot of information to support the discharge of those. With regard to the Corn Exchange, yes, it can be programmed into the construction period for the Scala. The key driver is a Scala roof. I think we've always said that. So the first piece of work that will be undertaken is repairing the Scala roof. The Corn Exchange, actually, from the conversations that we've had with Spell and Metcalfe, we've probably got a period of about 6 months before we confirm or otherwise whether we can go ahead with the Corn Exchange. And they believe that they can fit that into the existing programme if we confirm or otherwise a position within the next 5 or 6 months.
Thanks, Chair. I had a question really about just about the money. I wasn't totally sure, comparing the original report, page 8, the financial table, and the one on page 2 of the supplementary report, because in terms of the table on 2.6 in the supplementary report, the HVM redirected money is the same. The transformation fund's the same. The city plan reserves is now 0, whereas in the first report it was 297. And the earmark reserves is 660, whereas in the first report it was 757. I just wonder whether you could clarify what the difference is. Does that mean? Does it mean that effectively we're not touching the city plan reserves at all, and we're only using less of the earmark reserves?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So the original report tried to demonstrate that there was sufficient in earmark reserves available, but it involved utilising all of those reserves. So at that point, it was recognised that even if we did use all of the available reserves, we would still be in a position where we needed to borrow. And therefore, we took this approach to do it in 2 phases. In adopting phase 1 only, we are then able to complete the work without using all of those reserves. So the level of reserves we've got to use is now reduced to such that we can rely on those which we already have set aside for capital building work, other buildings, but nonetheless they are appropriate reserves which we can transfer to this purpose, and we don't have to dip into the other detailed earmark reserves, so they can remain in place and there is no borrowing requirement.
I think that's a really important message to understand why we're looking at the phasing. So the phasing means that we are able to hang on to sufficient reserves for day-to-day business and continuing to run council and council services, and that we aren't borrowing, we aren't sticking stuff on the credit card, in terms of, thank you. I think that will kind of help members in understanding what we're doing. I've got Pat next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as far as I can tell from the original report there, it looks to me as if the only thing that falls outside the cost estimates is whether or not there might be asbestos in there. And I still shudder at the memory of our previous problems with buildings with asbestos that needed to be cleared. Given that the contingency fund exists, and that is likely to be needed, if at all, for the roof, I'm wondering where the leeway is if we do discover asbestos and what we do about it. That's one thing. The second thing is I hope we're going to get some more detail at a future date on the value engineering, because the one thing I don't want to see is a tatty kind of low rent kind of finish. I think it's important that we have something that people want to use and are pleased with. And the more strategic point, really, it relates to what others have said, which is that this is a major regeneration project. It's probably the biggest one I really remember this council engaging on. So yes, we've got nerves, but I think the reputational risk of not doing it is huge, especially if we want money for the future, for anything else. And the disappointment, I think, that we might cause local people would be huge as well. Failure doesn't bear thinking about. I think we need to do it. That was it, really. So can you talk to me about the asbestos and maybe the detail of the value engineering?
With regard to asbestos, we have done some preliminary surveys and we haven't found any, but you're right, until we get in there and do the full assessment, you know, it may become apparent. The contingency itself, I mean, I think David used the example of the roof. The contingency isn't just for the roof, the contingency is across the project. And it may be bricks and mortar, it may be lintels, it may be the roof, and it may be asbestos. Until we start the project, obviously we don't quite know, where that contingency will be spent, but the whole reason we've got the contingency in there is to cover the unknowns, whether it be a roof, lintels or asbestos. With regard to the value engineering, we're certainly not looking to cheapen the product, as it were. You know, the solutions that which are being put forward, we're working with the developers, and the developers are using a local supply chain, and they are bringing forward examples of where they believe, you know, local labour, local materials can actually make savings on what has been costed previously. So, you know, the architects are very close to the project and don't want to see any cost cuts on, you know, the scheme that they're putting forward. So it's not going to be in the quality of the materials. It's you know, it's certain elements of construction where we're looking to see if we can make savings.
I think, may I come back on that just quite quickly? I'm thinking of things like marble floors and cornices and so forth, and it's quite obvious that we don't always have local experts on some of the heritage aspects of the building, you know, construction. It's quite a specialised area of endeavour, isn't it? So I'm not sure if we can do it locally or not, but I'm hoping that things like that can be accommodated.
Through you, Chair, just to add in terms of the contingency element, just to go back to the point that was previously made, there are still other reserves. So this proposal which we have here is to draw on certain reserves, but those ones which were itemised in the original report are still there. So there is still a potential, you know, in the event that there are things which are unknown unknowns and become issues, there is still an opportunity to do that. And we also still have the opportunity to borrow at the end of the day, you know, ultimately, if that's a recourse which we have to do. And so the supplementary report at paragraph 3.2 tries to make clear that what's proposed here in the use of reserves will do, you know, it is a solution, but in the event that alternative funding options come forward and different ways of doing that, then we'll consider those opportunities as well. So the advantage of the position, the phasing position, is it does give us a little bit of headroom in terms of, well, if there are serious problems, then there are things that we can do about that. The original position was that there was nothing left, you know, there was no further recourse to reserve. So this puts us in a little bit better position on that. And in terms of the point about the value engineering, when we discussed this with the major programme reference group, which is referenced in the report, we were at that stage looking at a value engineering proposal of I think 550,000. And as part of that discussion, there was very much that point made about, well, you know, we don't want to cheapen the product. Let's tone that down and focus only on those things which aren't going to have a significant impact in terms of the overall difference. So it's half of what we were originally talking about in terms of value engineering.
Thank you, Chairman. Where do I begin on this? It's been a number of years coming to this point, hasn't it? And I mean, huge respect. Thank you to officers and members as well for the numerous meetings that we've been in terms of trying to reach to a position where we are kind of today. And it is as some members have highlighted, a pivotal moment in terms of where we are in this project. I suppose a huge thank you to Spella Metcalfe as well, who's been along the journey from day one, and I think recognising their effort in helping us achieve a position where we are able to make a decision this evening shows hopefully their commitment to the, you know, the locally based city that they're in and a city that they want to show their respect in if we go ahead and agree this project. I completely understand Councillor Mace's point and the level of ambition that we could possibly show in this, but I think under the current circumstances that we are in, with the uncertainty around budgets, about central government settlements, rising costs in other areas and what's coming around the core areas, we've made a really good, prudent case here in terms of earmarking reserves that we thought were fit best and not touching our general earmarked reserves that could be saved for that rainy occasion for a project that might come down or over budget. In terms of that, it's a really sensible and pragmatic and prudent approach by a sensible set of councillors that are don't know what's around the horizon and want the best for the city. And I also remember I was here leading the case for the swimming pool all those years ago, back in 2012, 2013, I think it was. And the case then was always, shall we go for a 25-metre pool or shall we go for a 50-metre pool? And the cost that would bring, extra cost that would entail, and the benefit that it would bring. And it was an extremely tough decision then. And in hindsight now, with energy costs rising, the plant room issues that we're kind of facing, and the cost of heating a big space of water is now beginning to bite and understand. Hence, when you go for a swim now, you'll notice it'll be a little bit chilly in terms of that. So, you know, these decisions in hindsight can be, you know, the best or the worst things, but we're making a sensible decision based on the finances that we've got in terms of that. And I think, you know, the point about the corn exchange is that it's not an opportunity lost, it's still an opportunity. It might, with the, you know, options may come forward in terms of, who knows, a private commercial operator willing to take the whole space, which they will then give us a revenue which we can then plough back into the SCADA independent of any input from that. So that option is still there, as well as the opportunity of any other finance coming in. It is a phased project for a reason in that sense, that it leaves, it doesn't tie us into any one specific position and gives us the opportunity, when the opportunity arises, for that decision to be made, which will be brought before you know, the members of here. And I've got to say, the level of questioning from members has been really good, and for a project of this size, the amount of time and dedication that we've put into this and try to cover as many angles as possible shows that actually we are a functioning council that's good at governance and good at scrutiny and holding officers to account. So I'm really proud to be a part of the whole process in terms of where we are today, and the set of figures that we've got before us show, I think, a way forward. And not to mention that the situation with with central government in terms of the letter that they've put out, saying that, you know, your time's up basically. If you're not at a stage to kind of proceed, who knows what's going to happen with the money. And we've reached, and we've got all the facts before us to make a decision tonight to enable us the best opportunity to be able to deliver this project from Worcester. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a question, but I'm going to preface it with a few comments of my own. I am a big supporter of the project, and I'm intending to support the proposal to go forward with a split. And I think it's really important to acknowledge really the amount of regeneration this is going to bring to the city, and also the contribution to arts and small cinema and so on. I think it's also very good that potentially the problem could actually inadvertently bring a favourable outcome as well, in terms of bringing in third-party new money coming in for the corn market. But as Jabba has already said, this is the committee system and this is scrutiny. So I have got a question, and that question is about, in the report, you've looked at various alternative options, and one of the options that you haven't proposed is to go forward with borrowing the additional money to go forward with everything at the same time. And so really picking up from Councillor Mace's point, obviously that would be a circa £100,000 a year additional effect on the revenue budget. I'm very aware of the budget pressures that we have on this council, but I wonder whether you could spell out for us what those pressures are and what sort of implications that is going to mean if we were to do something like that. What you know, are we in that such a difficult position on the council that we can't afford £100,000 to support this project? Can you give us a comment on that?
Can I go first and then you?
Thank you. I think, as you say, you're well aware of the budget pressures that we face. There are a number of uncertainties at the moment in terms of the budget. We don't know what we're going to get this year in terms of a settlement. The pay negotiations are still ongoing, and payroll is our largest single element of cost for the business. As I said in my email earlier, if you look at borrowing levels projected over the next few years, they are increasing. We've talked as officers and members about taking an holistic approach to capital programmes, and some members will know that we're in parallel with this proceeding with a very significant investment in our bereavement services that would also require significant borrowing. So there's that as well. I think the other point I would make, and then I'll hand over to Shane, we are suggesting that we deplete our reserves significantly to meet the costs here without reverting to borrowing. And I think it's worth reminding everybody that there have been a number of local authorities that have got into trouble recently, and one of the questions is, why are local authorities finding it more difficult now? And I think one of the reasons for that, it's well versed, is that many local authorities have depleted their reserves, and therefore there's just a general lack of resilience in the system. So whereas a few years ago local authorities could ride out the peaks and troughs, and if there was an unintended budget problem, we could ride through it. The use of reserves makes that all the more difficult. So I think it is a difficult decision, but I think the overall view of the officers is that the best route now is to proceed with this recommendation. Otherwise, we wouldn't be placing it in front of members, and then to work to see if we can deliver the Corn Exchange in an alternative way, or with alternative funds should they become available, in the next few months. So I think it is difficult. You can always borrow a little bit more, but like we were with the previous project with the 500-seater, we sort of got to the point where we decided we didn't want to go any further, and it becomes more difficult to progress. So I think we are where we are in terms of officers. We believe this is the best approach for the project and for the council. So I'll let Shane add to that as he sees fit. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Three things really, which kind of went through my mind when we were preparing the report once we got the 11.1 million price. There were, firstly, the consideration that we already know that we have a budget gap, which were in February, when we set it, we were talking about £1.2 million budget gap for this coming year. Now we know that pressures have improved and that situation is eased, but nonetheless, there is a budget gap, and any level of borrowing would add to that. We've also been doing some work with the team around understanding our minimum revenue provision and what our borrowing looks like in future. The Treasury report, which we talked about, the halfway stage, indicated that we are looking at the moment probably to increase our borrowing by £7 or £8 million over the next 5 years. So there's an ongoing increase. And there are some emerging indications to suggest that that might not be enough, which might produce some challenges in terms of the capital programme. Secondly, we have always sort of taken the view, and I'm not sure it was ever overtly stated in any reports as such, that we would not want to be in a position where taking advantage of £17.9 million grant from the government resulted in the council being worse off on a revenue basis. So we've always taken the view that at least the cost, the construction element of this shouldn't end up being something which costs us money, because you could argue then, well, why accept the grant in the first place? You know, it's got to try and work within that parameter. And thirdly, we have a risk profile which we use within the council, within our commercial strategy, which basically operates on the basis of three scenarios: best, worst, and median case. So if that were applied to this, then the median case would be that the contract breaks even, that it runs as expected. The best case would be that it underspends, so we end up with a benefit. And the worst case would be that there is additional costs which are unexpected. At the moment, we've measured that risk on the basis of advice we've had from Equals and others as about 5%. So if we apply that methodology to this investment, then as long as we fall within the overall contingency which we've allowed, then that meets our risk profile. And if we go to a stage where we need to borrow over and above that, then it falls outside of that. So at the point that we got together, when we first got the 11.121 million price, my position was that we couldn't recommend proceeding on the basis of that. And I would still that. I don't think I would be prepared to recommend that we go ahead unless we can meet that risk profile.
Thank you. I've got a couple of people who want to come back, so just very quickly, I've got Adam and then Jabba.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks to the officers for answering some very difficult questions there about the details of the finance and the risks. I think we do need to go just a bit back to the big picture of this project. I've spent the last few days walking with some Worcester residents down in the South Downs, and they wondered what I was rushing back for. What was so important that you were coming back on a night like this? And I said, well, I've got to be back for a discussion about the Scala. Ah, isn't that a big theatre to replace the Swan, they said. And if you read your report, I'm afraid that's what it still reads like. We have to always tell the big positive vision about this really exciting project, about its flexibility, its offer it provides to a huge range of cultural industry developments in the city, and its enormous potential regeneration benefits, as Pat outlined. But the key thing, and of course keeping the Swan Theatre going, keeping that going as well. Its flexibility and its effectiveness at making use of existing buildings, I think, is enormous. But I do think, as a council, we shouldn't lose any opportunity to tell the full story about this project, because there's still people who are waiting to hear what it is we're doing. And what we seem to be doing is doing a fantastic project which will tick lots of boxes, and will use the scarce resource now of regeneration money, which is not unlikely to be on offer again for several years while the new government thinks about where it stands. And while we've got it, let's use it. Thank you.
Thank you. You make a very good point around publicity. We do, and some of you may have seen it, we do in fact have a website, a Scala website, and we are offering the opportunity for people to sign up to regular newsletters. You will understand, as of up to today, we've been slightly reticent about overly publicising the availability of the website, and I've been talking to Rob Byrne about when we should go live with the first newsletter, and I've said to him, not yet. So we are, I think, poised like a coiled spring to go public on this. But of course, tonight is a very, very important decision, and therefore we've tended to just hold back a little bit before we launch any further PR. Thank you.
Just quickly, Chair, I mean, we talk about obviously depleting reserves, David, in terms of that. There is obviously make mention of that, that some of those reserves will be replenished as well. I think that's important for the general public to know that there is an opportunity for those to be published when we do get some Section 106 money, which adds greater credence to the fact that how we've handled this in terms of that we've thought about actually replenishing those reserves as well. It's not just dipping into them. The point around obviously the borrowing, I think Shane, you've made that really, really eloquently. Many moons ago, my first job was as an underwriter, and the checklist that you went through in terms of, are you on the voters roll? Well, hopefully we are as a city council on the voters roll. How long have you been in the job? Have you got enough wages to cover the expenditure, and is there any other options for you to kind of use? And two of those questions are a bit of a red herring in terms of the final settlement and what lies around the corner in terms of our own budget. So it's the safe option in terms of that. And also, there have been a number of requests from for other projects for extra money. Don't bear in that mind. So you know those things might come forward, and there might be a better project that is urgently in need that we can possibly might need to borrow for. You know, those options are still open. Whilst committing to this, whilst there are other options available, I think it's a retrograde step. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessie?
My apologies. There's two questions that I think are important for people to be aware of, and I'll keep them brief. I know that we're facing some restrictions in terms of deadlines with regard to the Levelling Up Fund. So I wonder if you could spell out for people that might be watching remotely why we have to make this decision now, why we couldn't just wait until October, until we have more certainty. And the other question that I've already been asked by members of the public is, why do we have only one bidder? Why didn't we have many bidders that would be competing on price? If you could clarify, that would be great. Thank you.
I'll do the first one. And I've forgotten what it was.
About deadlines.
Deadlines, yes. Sorry. It's been a long day already. Yes, we have already been successful in seeking a project extension for all of the reasons we've already discussed, and that project extension was to the end of this month. We had a letter a week or so ago from the department reminding us that our contract extension was coming to an end, and I'm sure it was a standard letter that went to many local authorities around the country, in fact. And we were told that we could put in, if we were not going to meet the end of September deadline, which in terms of our case is to have the money contracted, committed, signed off and signed with our construction partners, which we're not going to do that in the next couple of days. It will take a little longer. So we would be able to apply for an extension past the end of September, but after the end of September, the drawbridge is being pulled up on any further extensions. And I suspect this is a message from the government in terms of all of the projects nationally that are running behind. Jamie may want to comment on the number of, because Jamie's been talking to the department, and the department have an expectation about how many extensions they're going to receive in the next couple of days. So I think that's the reason why we need to get this over the line, if I can put it that way. If we are ready to commit with phase one, I think the department will look much more favourably upon giving us an extension. There is some discussion about whether we need to make a formal project adjustment request with this. We have delegated powers within 30% of original budget and 30% of original outcomes to vary the project ourselves, but with a project adjustment, for want of a better word, of such significance involving one whole building, the advice from the department is that they suggest we put in a request. It may be that we submit it for information only because we are within our delegated powers, but we are thinking about that as well. I think, just to add, it's fair to say that we have a good relationship with the department. And coming back to Pat's point about reputation, we do have a good reputation in terms of delivery. Cultural Development Fund projects have been delivered on time and on budget. We've done a significant amount of work already on Future High Streets Fund with the public realm and the retail property enhancement scheme. We have a nice shiny gold health and wellbeing centre delivered through our Towns Fund. So we do have a track record of success, and I think that means that the department does look favourably upon Worcester as a partner that can deliver. And I think we're looking favourably at an extension, but those are why we've got the imminent thresholds, well, milestones really, in terms of making a decision. Don't know if you want to make any comment on that.
No, I'll come in the second part of the question though, which was, I think, why we only had a single bidder. We did have two bidders. The second bidder withdrew quite early on in the process. We did a full tender package. We took to the market. We did an awful lot of soft market testing with both Tier 1, Tier 2 and Tier 3 contractors. I think, unfortunately, as a competition, there were roughly 80 Future High Street programmes being delivered across the country. So I think contractors could actually choose which ones they wanted to apply for. A lot of these opportunities were brought to the market at the same time. So contractors could pick and choose which projects they were keen to apply for. And the other thing is, we've discussed it today, but there is an element of risk. We've got a listed building and locally listed building, so they are difficult to deliver, which again, will put some parties off. Thank you.
Thank you to colleagues. This is an important moment, an important series of decisions in front of us, and it illustrates the complexity of this project, the complexity of delivering a major capital investment in an existing building. It's a regeneration project, it's not greenfield, and the evolving design over the period of time, and there are risks involved in that, risks in all sorts of ways. And I'm grateful that, with the supplementary agenda, kind of revisited and updated those risks. So the risks is not just about money. There are other aspects, not least reputational damage to Worcester, to this council, and significant financial risk to this council. Never let it be said that we lack ambition. No, the ambition to deliver this and what will be there at the end of the day will be amazing. It will be, a very significant addition to Worcester, to our heritage, to our cultural centre, and add a great deal to city life, and that's the prize. We've been talking about money, we've been talking about buildings, and I think the really important step on the journey is that we have the creative consortium and the vision and the value that will be delivered within the building by the people and the creative people that will be inhabiting that building, and for you know, inclusion and for all our residents and to visitors. But we can't allow council finances to be completely swallowed up in it. There are many other things that I'm ambitious about, that we are ambitious about, and we have to have the security of maintaining our services and balancing the books. And it's taken an enormous amount of hard work to get to the financial position that we are in. And if we hadn't made decisions, if we hadn't had a programme of voluntary redundancies, we would not be in our financial balance, and our medium-term financial plan would be more challenged than it is. And you know, I don't want to kind of throw away that achievement by throwing it all into this project. The Scala will be amazing. The Corn Exchange is phase 2, and there are other opportunities, there are other ways of looking at it. So I think, you know, hanging on to the total vision, and this is about the process, the decisions for the next phase of delivery towards that. I mean, do you want me to read out the recommendations as a whole, or do you want me to take them one by one? Are there differences of view within it, or should I take it as one? One by one? Okay. So the committee notes the budget implications of the fully tendered price for the construction works to the Scala and Corn Exchange, and approves the proposal to proceed with the construction works in 2 phases as set out in the report. So all those in favour of that recommendation? Appreciate that. So 1.2, authorise the Managing Director to engage with government over this revised phased proposal and the additional time required to finalise contract negotiations over the next few weeks. Everybody? Thank you. Subject to the satisfactory conclusion of negotiations with government and pre-construction activities, delegate authority to the Managing Director and Corporate Director Planning and Governance in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chairs of this committee to enter into a construction contract with Speller Metcalfe Malvern Limited to proceed immediately with phase 1 of the project, namely works to the Scala, up to a maximum budget sum to be confirmed at the committee meeting. All those in favour? Thank you. Test of my reading skills. Authorise the use of council reserves and or borrowing as reported to committee to fund the balance of the phase 1 Scala construction contract and client contingency sum above the maximum sum available from the Future High Streets Fund grant. All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. And note that further reports will be brought to the committee as the project progresses over the next few months. I don't think we need to vote on that. Thank you. That's a really important decision, and thank you for everybody's attention to it. I will just take a moment of any other business before we move on to item 6, the place partnership bid, because I know Jabba's going to be leaving us at that point. Shane tells me this is his very, very last committee meeting, so I feel obliged to say nice things about him again.
No, it's not.
Thank you for shepherding us through financial ups and downs and the ins and outs of this project. I think, no, tonight, this will be but one of the legacies that you leave us, and we are extremely grateful for that.
Thank you, Chair. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. It also gives me the opportunity to introduce Sal Khan, who's sitting quietly in the corner. Sal is going to be our interim Section 151 officer. So he started today. So this is a bit of baptism of fire. He's now going to make this work. And of February, so he'll go through the budget setting process. And we have concluded the recruitment of a permanent Section 151 officer by that stage. So there'll be some overlap and transition between the three. But thank you very much for all your help and support with this. It's an amazing project, and it's great to have got to this stage.
Thank you. And I think, yeah, we're nearer to kind of completion with our Future High Streets Fund than many others. And
Feeling
it's,
the need for a champagne.
we can't afford that.
I'm in a home.
Some nice unsubby water.
There's plenty water on the table. Right, agenda item 6, Arts Council Place Partnership bid. Sian, this is you.
Thank you, Chair. We're having a cultural evening tonight. You have another committee report before you, which is about investment in arts and culture. This report's come to the Policy and Resources Committee because it's timely to seek a mandate to submit a bid, and we don't have a meeting of the Place and Economic Development Committee, who would ordinarily see this until a little later. So in terms of the steer we've had from the funders, there's a really good opportunity, if we are submitting a bid, to do so against their timeline, which would allow for a grant award for the new financial year, so April next year. So after some time socialising ideas, we've kind of picked up the pace and developed a bid, and that's why that's with you tonight. In terms of what this is for us as a city, it is a tremendous opportunity to do a number of things at once, which are hugely important to this council. Maybe I feel buoyed up by the last item. So things that I know from working with members are hugely important to members. This is an opportunity to invest in skills, young people, neighbourhood activity, to build on the capital investments we've already made in our community centres, to bring life and colour into our emerging cultural centre in the city centre, and to do so with a group of organisations that we already work with, but to do this in an arts and culture bid. So this is absolutely great timing for Worcester. This is more than Worcester City Council. It's very important for a place partnership bid to the Arts Council that this is a proper, deep and meaningful partnership. So it's very important to the Arts Council that the local authority is one of the signatories, and in fact we will be the accountable body. But it's also very important that it's delivered in partnership. The report itself is quite detailed because we're really explaining to you the whole process we're going through in terms of scoping it. But I really just want to move straight into saying, if you look at the preferred option, it's tremendous. In the time we've been working together to scope this, we can now confidently say that Worcester City Council, Worcestershire County Council, Public Health, Seven Arts, Worcester Bid, Heart of Worcester College, Worcester University, Worcester Community Trust, The Artery, C&T, Dance Fest Mobilise, Worcester Mellor, all these organisations want to be part of it and have been involved in the discussions about skills, creative industries, talent, neighbourhoods, enlivening the city centre, and there's been a real meeting of minds around now's the time to make that place partnership bid for Worcester. So I really wanted to start there because I think that sometimes when you're looking to submit a funding bid, you're needing to align your objectives to a funder's and weave your own narrative into theirs. In this instance, this fits exactly, I think, with the values and the steer that we've had from yourselves and our own strategic plans and priorities. So I've also included in the report what the Arts Council criteria are. I think that's very important because it's important that we understand there are a number of type parameters that we have to work within to secure an Arts Council grant. And so although we can be creative in terms of creative outcomes, we have to be very carefully calibrated in terms of the sorts of inputs and the ways of working that the Arts Council is looking for. So there's a lot of thoughts gone into that. We've had a professional bid writer working with Elaine Knight at Seven Arts. So Debbie Birch and Seven Arts have really pulled this together. And the underpinning emerging partnership group, as well as the partnership working we've been doing with the organisations I listed, has been this group that was set up last year called the Cultural Compact. So why have a creative consortium and a cultural compact? You know, why not have two? The Cultural Compact, again, is very much an Arts Council initiative and has been successful elsewhere in terms of bringing cultural, creative, tourism organisations around the table. And our emerging cultural compact in the city has met on a handful of occasions so far. As it says in the report, this is not all council-led. The chair is from the university, the vice chair is from Seven Arts. It's really important that the Arts Council see, to make future investment in Worcester, the legacy of their previous investments in Worcester. And we're able to say to them that you know, we have a refurbished set of railway arches. We delivered festivals we hadn't delivered before. Some new community organisations have been established, one of which is Mellor, and the Arts Council have been very keen to see their previous investments re-supported through a process like that. But there's also the Artery, you'll be aware, they're based in the Arches, and they didn't exist before there was a home for them in the Arches. So there's been a lot of, the trajectory of the investment that's been made previously it's now visible in the city. And for the Arts Council, that's really important that you're building on that previous success and taking that forward. So I think just to be clear then, the actual draft proposal is set out in section 3. I think I've probably covered some of the key points, but there's some metrics in there for you. All of that is subject to finessing over the next 8 to 12 weeks. And it's an iterative process about designing the actual programme. It's clear that we will be delivering festivals. It's clear we'll be doing work in local neighbourhoods. It's not clear yet exactly how many neighbourhoods or exactly which festivals, and that's the process that now needs to be sharpened up as we go forward to making our final bid submission. But the report seeks a mandate from committee to make the bid submission and to take this ultimately through to delivery. The Place and Economic Development Committee will oversee that delivery, and there will be regular reports. I haven't covered the finance section, perhaps because I've got such an august finance colleague sitting next to me. There is no pledge from the council at this point, because we've already made a financial commitment to talent and audience development through the Scala working capital, and we've itemised that and explained that in the business case. So we don't need to make a further investment. We need to make our match work to meet the needs of both projects, which we think is absolutely doable when you think about roles like community engagement and talent development. That's absolutely something we can do. The section itemises where other sources of funding would come from, and it's very clear that it will be hugely valuable to the project if everybody who comes forward as a delivery partner puts something in, even if that's in kind. And we know that as a city council because we've chosen to deliver events ourselves, and we know the hidden cost of all the events we put on in terms of the human resource and the cost of all the sort of the preparation. So we know that partners can bring, smaller partners can bring a lot of value by offering personnel and time and so forth. I'm going to pause at that point, Chair, and take questions.
Thank you very much. If I could just kind of ask the first one. So this is about the committee agreeing to put in an expression of interest, and we would expect to hear back when, and as to when, you know.
We'd expect to hear back in 8 weeks, Chair. The report doesn't propose that we will then come back for a further approval. The report is to submit the bid, the first stage of which is the expression of interest. We then work that up into a detailed bid in dialogue with the Arts Council over a number of months.
Thank you for that clarification. Questions, comments? Robin?
Thank you, Chair. It's a good thing that we're hearing this today, having just discussed the Scala, and two colleagues have already mentioned the value of regeneration in the city.
it feels right to me that we are investing in people at the same time. So I'm hugely supportive of this, and I really look forward to seeing it being delivered. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I agree, and I think that it's good that we've got a whole committee devoted to culture and artistic endeavour for the city for a nice change. I think there are still some matters to be clarified about what the cultural compact is all about what the consortium is all about that's going to lead it, about how that feeds back to members through the place committee. I think there are some, some fine tuning to be done on that area. Certainly, experience of the last 12 months has been that it's taken a little time to focus. I think what we should be doing clearly is building on the success of the Cultural Development Fund and what that allowed us to do. And if you remember, it was not just about the arches, it was not just about the light festivals and the other festivals. It was also about destination management, which is fundamental. There's a lot of what goes on in Worcester is about the visitor economy, and we have to keep banging that message home that we are able to support people who come and visit our cultural infrastructure, support them properly, and not just with this kind of work, but also in the wider way in which we approach the City Council delivery of services. When do we tidy the high street? When do we collect the bins? What is our road structure like? What's the car park pricing going to be like? All those things matter absolutely fundamentally to our visitor economy, whether that's mums and dads from people who are living and working in Worcester, or whether it's people coming to America or Australia or wherever it is to visit. So I think those things are really, really important. And it's good that the Arts Council has recognised that over the years, and hopefully will continue to recognise that. I think that the other thing is that one of the things where the CDF project, the Arches project that I chaired, fell down, I think, is, if we're honest, is on the skills and enterprise area. And this does provide us an opportunity to revisit that and to try and develop it much more in a much more focused way and effective way than we had before. So very pleased to see this, very encouraged by it. Hope it's very successful. And just specifically, you've mentioned already, Chair, but I did want to pay tribute to Shane as chairing the Cultural Development Fund project. He was very effectively steered the project board, I know, which was his last meeting this afternoon, but also the steering group that we had together with the partners from the university and Seven Arts who led the project. And very happy to see when I came out of the station the other day, the expanse of open blue sky opposite Falgate Street Station, which very soon will be even bigger.
Can I just say, when your colleagues start to describe you as august, it's time to go.
There were some kind of questions in there with regard to kind of the governance of this going forward, if able to say.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, Chair, I should have probably covered that in my summary. In the governance section, I've referred to building on the success and the learning from the way we set the governance up for the CDF programme. So we had the two levels. We had a steering group, which was stakeholders, so councillor representatives and representatives from other organisations who represented the key delivery partners. And then we had a project board, which was the officer working group, and we had actually a tight legal structure with funding agreements in place, because when the council is the accountable body, it's really important that we can pass on obligations for delivery if we are sharing those risks with third parties. So we had set up the governance quite robustly. I think what perhaps Councillor Gregson would agree is that over time, probably a few faces changed and a few others sort of stayed and committed. And I think that these projects go on for a long time, and I think that you do have to have some people who make that investment and give it that vision and that stakeholder leadership, and Councillor Gregson did that as our chair. And being able to keep that narrative going is really important. And I think the Place and Economic Development Committee has a real role to play in that. And I remember when we brought the community festivals report and Elaine Knight came and presented that, you know, she got a round of applause because it was just the tangible outcomes of here's investment and here's what it's delivered. And it is easy to walk past the arches and see that investment, but it's harder to see the other investments that have involved the people and all the hours that have gone into the other parts of the programme. So in terms of the governance, we would want to replicate the same sort of model that we had for CDF in terms of those two layers of a steering group and an officer project board. Obviously in terms of making significant investments, if there are key decisions to be taken which change the risk profile, they will come to PED committee for more than information, they will come for decision, but otherwise I would expect this to go on the PED scorecard and be one of those projects that PED oversees as well.
Thank you. Once again, I mean, it feels like the icing on the cake. If we get this will really make a lot of other things work well, won't it? And again, it's our track record has been important, and the partnership working that we engage in has been important. Something else I was going to say. Oh yes, just an interesting fact I picked up, I think it was last week, in the national press, and it was the respectable national press, I can't remember if it's the Times or the Guardian, but it said that the heritage sector was actually economically much more important than sport. And I thought, oh yes, we're going the right direction, you know. So, you know, culture and heritage is where it's all happening.
Just a quick question about timing and when the budget, when the money would be received from this if we were successful. Would there be any potential for any money that we got from this that could be used, obviously not for capital, but obviously for funding things to do with the Scala project as well, putting events on in the Scala? Is this sort of complementary and supports that as well?
Through you, Chair. Yes, absolutely. You'll remember when we were talking about the business plan, how all the advice we had said how important it is to build the following and build the pipeline, both of artists and audiences, for in the long period before the building opens. And in the Scala business plan, we've talked about doing events next summer, for example, and then, you know, after that, doing them at other intervals, whether that's winter and the summer after. This absolutely fits really well with that, being able to use our Scala working capital investment wisely to support this programme, and if there's work done in a neighbourhood area, making sure that that translates into something then that those local people have been involved with, that they want to come and do something in the city centre as a result of that, that they feel empowered to be part of something in the city centre, whether that's in the Arches or in the Scala when it's opened, or in the run-up to it, just in Angel Place or wherever, that they feel that that's relevant to them, and there's not projects being done in isolation. Really avoiding that scenario where looks like something's been dropped in and delivered and then just left again. It's got to feel, you know, it's been homegrown, but that there's ambition for people to take it to the next level and, you know, showcase their talent in the city centre.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say there's so much to like about this report. I was going to count how many times you've said local in it, which to me says a lot about what this is, but also, you know, inclusivity, reaching people from diverse backgrounds with different needs and abilities, people who normally don't, you know, have access to the arts. You know, this is so important that, you know, the arts sometimes can be seen as something for elite, you know, and it isn't, it's for everybody. And so I think this is so important, and thank you very much for taking the time to do this whilst doing all the work you've been doing on Scala. I'm sure when you first saw this, you kind of thought, I'd love this, but how am I going to fit it into my busy time? So thank goodness you haven't gone on holiday, that's what I'd say. And I really hope we're successful. I think we need to keep everything crossed, but the value that this can add to the city, and to our young people as well. You know, we had the Paint Festival recently, and seeing some really young, talented artists doing work, you know, local people actually. There's an artist from Droitwich, we've had somebody who went to Bishop Perrone do art. You know, it's making a difference in our city for us. It makes it a lot more relevant and significant. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you. I mean, this is bringing together a number of things and actually kind of done at pace because there was a limited amount of time to pull it together. And, you know, the values of this city and this administration are absolutely fit with the Arts Council aspiration, and what the cities has already delivered has put us on the Arts Council radar, that they know we can do festivals, we can do inclusivity, we can do new things. And it absolutely, there is, you know, I've been around meeting and talking to a number of the sort of key stakeholders in the city, businesses in the city, and there is absolutely kind of a new kind of spirit of collaborative working, and within Worcester there is a very definite creative community and that are up for doing things together. And in terms of business, it's kind of surprising actually what some of the businesses, what the local employment opportunities are, that what you might think of as a manufacturing business is actually looking for sort of creative input in terms of product design, or, you know, creating adverts, creating social media. So those skills and skills development is going to be really important for in many ways, and give people new opportunities. Arts absolutely should be for everyone, and yeah, I don't want any kind of creative boundaries. This is a brilliant opportunity, and I really hope that we are successful. So I'll read the recommendations all in one go this time. So that the committee approves the submission of a place partnership bid to Arts Council England and the cash match contribution from the City Council as outlined in this report. Subject to a successful decision from the Arts Council, delegates authority to the Corporate Director, Planning and Governance, in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chairs of the committee, to progress the detailed development of the bid and programme delivery arrangements, including entering into all necessary legal agreements, and notes that the Place and Economic Development Committee will receive updates on the programme as it progresses. So all those in favour of the That's unanimous. Thank you. We now have items involving the disclosure of exempt information. So if the committee could formally pass the resolution that under section 100A, brackets 4, of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of information as defined in section 12A of the said Act. Thank you.